Welcome to Coddiwompling along the Dow with Noel Eastwood, and today I'm going to talk about Chiron. There's good old Chiron. When I wrote my book on the astrology of health, I had to think of what sort of cover image should I have, and of course immediately came the recognition that Chiron in our chart is perhaps the most appropriate. And here we have Chiron in his cave on Mount Pelion in Greece, and there's his bowl of herbs there. So I've written a few articles on Chiron. They're in my free newsletter, so make sure when you click the like on this, that you jump onto my website and subscribe to my free newsletters, because he's a bit of a wolf in sheep's clothing, that is for sure. Of all the archetypes, he's perhaps the one that's going to sting you the most. His keyword, the keyword I give him is anguish. It's emotional pain, but he's also the source of physical pain as well, and psychological pain, intellectual pain, a whole heap of things. This is his glyph, which is a K over a circle, and that stands for Cowl, K-O-W-A-L. He is the astronomer, that discovered Chiron back in 1977. And let's have a look at some, here we go. Let me grab this chart up here. This is Muhammad Ali. And he actually makes a good example of, projection as well as the role of Chiron. Chiron in this chart sits in the first house, and don't forget, I use whole signs, which means the ascendant sign begins at 0 degrees and runs for a whole sign. So every single house is the size of the sign that follows. Chiron is in the first house, and of course, if you watch my other videos, the first house is a super duper important house. It contains, it's like the kernel or the essence of a seed. That little point where it germinates, boom, out pops the plant's leaves and stem, and down goes the roots from that point. Well, that's the first house. It's our interface with the world, and so it is how we connect with everything around us, how we learn our lessons, how we process information, and what we project out onto the world. Now, Taylor made this comment in an email to me. When it comes to Chiron, when his unconscious wound is not being addressed, we can project that onto others and blame them for their pain. Now, this chart actually shows that very well, the blame part. Others may sense someone's wound or sensitivity and use it to their advantage for manipulation. Now, sensitivity is a very strong word. I use it quite a lot, and in my practice, when I was a psychologist, I'm now retired. Sensitivity was something that brought people for counselling. I very rarely saw someone that was doing really well in life. They would probably come because their wife or husband sent them. So, Chiron, I'm just going to quickly have a look at this chart of Muhammad Ali, the boxer. His Chiron is in the first house, which elevates it. So is Pluto. So the two most painful archetypes of the zodiac are in the first house. So they're being projected all the time, an intensity and an anguish. They're both retrograde, which sort of pulls the energy back a little bit and can make it fester a little bit more. But they're both applying to a Leo ascendant. They're both in Leo, which can give them a brashness and want attention and to be a bit of a show-off. But Leo is those things, of course, but Leo is also loyalty and happiness and generosity and giving. Look at these leads. What do I look for in a chart is the keys to that person. The keys are the conflict points. Where are the sticky conflicts in a person's psyche that I can see in the astrology chart that would lead me to understand that person, and therefore, as a healer, to find the point that I can apply my skills and knowledge to bring that person an awareness of what's happening within them, and to then lead them towards healing in their particular way, because everybody heals in a different way. Now, Chiron I also see Chiron as the fundamental or the conceptual wound that we're born with. We bring into this world. It could be that we come into this world with a physical deformity, an intellectual disability, psychological problems. You could be born into a family where domestic violence is rife, where there is trauma. You could be born into a family in a war-torn country where everybody is living in fear every moment of their life for a bomb to fall on their house. So Chiron can represent the anguish of living in adversity, and we're looking particularly in the first, say, 5 to 7 years. Now, this chart shows that in Muhammad Ali's infancy, because that's the first house, represents probably the first few years of life, that his infancy probably was tough. Now, what we have as well is that they're both applying to the ascendant, and Chiron is conjunct the ascendant and applying towards it. Even though it's retrograde, it does go forward again, of course, and go in that direction. And just a quick lesson for you to remind you, the planets all go in an anti-clockwise direction, except the North Node, which goes in a clockwise direction. So these guys are applying, and when they cross over his ascendant, maybe at 1 year of age or a couple of years of age for Pluto, then there would no doubt be a healing crisis of some sort. So Chiron represents a whole host of illnesses. See, it could be like in my case was plagued with tonsillitis, mumps, and respiratory infections in my infancy. I will show you my chart here. I've got it somewhere here. If I can get it up. Here we go. Just quickly. Here's me. I'll have Chiron conjunct my ascendant. It's separating. It's retrograding, but it's separating. When I was born, I had a whole heap of infections. My memory of my infancy was one of pain. It wasn't much fun. Okay, the story of Chiron. I borrowed some of Jessica Davidson's words and added some stuff. It's good to read broadly. When you do your research, like I do for these presentations and for my newsletters, I try to do as much research as possible and to draw upon websites, draw upon books, draw upon articles, journal articles, as much as you can. And then you synthesize it and squeeze it, and out will come a few drops, a few words. So please visit her site, and also I got some more on the worldhistory.org. Now, as all Greek myths that we have today, they come from a long time ago, and there's never one single myth. There's variants of that myth. And the same with Chiron. There are, half a dozen variants to how he got his wound, etc. So basically, he is the son of Saturn, who took the form of a horse to impregnate the water nymph Phaera. His sister and brother, Apollo and Artemis, taught Chiron the skills of hunting, medicine, music and prophecy, including astrology. He lived in a cave on Mount Pelion and was a renowned healer and teacher of wisdom. He taught many heroes and heroines, including Hercules. Hercules, one day, fired an arrow into the air and it hit Chiron in the ankle, or the heel, or the knee. This is where the variants come in. The arrow was dipped in the Hydra's blood and there was no cure. Despite being the best healer in the world and an immortal, Chiron couldn't heal himself. After travelling the world to find a cure, he asked Zeus to give give his immortality to Prometheus. I think Prometheus is up here, which allowed him to die. Zeus placed him in the Centaurus constellation. I think I got the constellation here. Yep. So he was placed up in the sky in the stars. There he is. Now, we all know the story of Prometheus, so I won't go through that, but good old Chiron was a wizard. He knew his stuff. He taught the most famous heroes of antiquity and was an absolute marvel. There's Hercules and his labours fighting the Hydra, the seven-headed Hydra. He was wearing his lion's skin that he won at a previous labour. And, of course, the blood of the Hydra, there's no cure, and that's what he dipped his arrow in when he was playing around outside Chiron's cave. Here he is going to Zeus, and he's not feeling very well. He was in so much pain that he sought the knowledge of every healer that he found, but nobody could heal him. Now that tells us a story as well. Part of the story of Chiron is knowing when to lie down and say, enough is enough, I'm letting this go, I'm moving on. And that's that Chironic moment. And we all have it in our lives that something is not working and we wrestle with it and we lose sleep over it, we argue about it, we fight, we become disturbed and distorted. And eventually, if we're lucky, we recognise that this is going nowhere, I'm not making any forward motion with this, I've got to let it go. So keywords: the conception wound, what you're born with or gained in early childhood. Wounds could be physical, psychological, intellectual, religious, sexuality, race or society based. It also represents animal instincts versus human instincts, so self-control and applying reason. The centaurs, of which he is associated with, rarely exhibited self-control or rational thought. So he was the king of the centaurs, and they were a very bawdy, rowdy, violent and aggressive creatures, except for a very few. They represented that animal instinct of, there's a target, go for it, wild. Give them a bit of alcohol, they would lose it. There's that key word of anguish. So anguish is that feeling of, it's a little bit about being trapped. I'm trapped with this disability, this injury, this wound. I'm stuck with it. I can never escape it. I can't escape the pain. So it can eat us from the inside. Knowing when to stop fighting your wound and recognising when enough is enough, which is more of the keys to Chiron. Release, letting go of painful memories, people, situations, jobs and relationships. Now that line there is very important. Letting go. People. You know, some people, they don't appreciate you, they just use you. Recognise it. When you recognise it and you've summed it up and assess it, you let them go. You cut them out of your life. They're taking from you. You don't feel good in their company or in their presence. They're not making you feel a better person. Situations. You know, there will be countless situations in which you just don't feel comfortable. That actually when you walk away, you feel worse than when you went there. You just stop going to those parties or those meetings or whatever. Jobs, knowing when to walk from a job that's poisoning you, and relationships that are toxic. Very important, those ones there. A little bit like Saturn is the letting go, the walking away, the ending of a relationship. He was a healer. He's healed physical, psychological, spiritual, and all the other alls. He was a teacher of secrets. So Chiron, in his own way, let me go back to this one. Chiron, in his own way, was a complete archetype of wisdom and knowledge and skill. And to take that, what he has, you have to earn it. He is a hard taskmaster. When we look at the astrology charts of people with a great sensitivity, which would include Chiron in that group of planets that I consider enhancing your sensitivity. Remember, sensitivity is a two-edged sword. It's great to be sensitive, but things hurt, and you have to learn how to manage that. But he's a hard taskmaster in that he demands that you earn the right to his knowledge, his wisdom, his skill and experience. Rarely are his lessons easy or without sacrifice. Wisdom. His initiations are a way to earn the right to access his wisdom. These can occur when your wound flares up, becoming an opportunity to meditate and use the wisdom that arises. Meditate, contemplate, processing the particular chironic wound that you have. Use that moment to take the step forward. Chiron's initiations represent the shaman's path, the mystic's path, and other paths towards natural healing. So when we think of the shaman or the mystic, we're also thinking of Chiron. The wounded healer. The best healers are those who know your wounds because they have them too. Chiron's gifts are hard-earned, but when you've earned them, you become an initiate of spiritual, psychological, and physical healing. I'm skipping a lot of stuff here. Like, how do you earn the right to Chiron's gifts? One way, as you well know, is through meditation. How do you earn his wisdom, the mystic's quest? Meditation is part of every spiritual pursuit that we've drawn upon through paganism, even witchcraft, through shamanism, alchemy. Everything involves some form of contemplation, some form of quietness, silence, and solitude. Because how do you listen to your intuition when you're watching TV, when you're watching Friends or Home and Away? How do you access that innate wisdom of Chiron or Pluto or Sagittarius or whatever when you're constantly engaged on the phone, talking? So earning the right to his gifts means that you have to make sacrifices, and part of that sacrifice is to take time out from the world and listen. In a light trance, enter your astrology chart and walk up to Chiron. There we go. There he is. So I began this in a journey of my own with the astrology chart by imagining myself sitting in here. I would be in the middle of a chart, my eyes closed, and I would gaze around the circle and see all my archetypes. And if any of them interested me, or if I had a particular interest in one of the or two of the archetypes, I would walk up to them and walk up to him. Ask how he operates in your life, what you can do to heal your wounds. So you would go to Chiron in that first house and introduce yourself. I'm doing some work and I'd like to understand how you operate within my psyche. What do you do? What are you trying to teach me? How can I use and access your wisdom, your knowledge and your skill? Then you ask him to take your hands in his and to send all his light and love into you. And this is where you just melt. You become super passive. Your hands are out here. Well, I'll bring them up here. And you see, yes, it's winter in Canberra and it's cold. So you ask him to take your hands in his, and then you become soft and passive. You feel the texture of his hands, and then you feel the warmth of his energy as it flows into you. And you just melt. until you are filled with his energy. And you do that over and over and over and over and over. Every day, a couple of times a day even. What you're doing is you're aligning your psyche with an archetypal form. And the best way to do that is actually touch them. Make it tactile, make it real. Your inner world is real when you're in there. The inner world is not just pictures or sounds or feelings. It's all five senses. Do this regularly, daily, weekly, until you understand his role in your life and how to actualize his powers in the real world. Now, that's not to say that you're going to wake up from your meditation and lay and start putting your hands on people and healing them. It doesn't work like that. You have to earn that right. It can be done. People can do it. But believe me, there's not many that can actually do that. It takes an enormous amount of effort, time and study and practice to be able to do something like that. What you're after initially is to understand what are you doing in my life? With Muhammad Ali, he's in the first house. It makes him extraordinarily sensitive. Now, if we erase the rest of the chart with an eraser, then we've got three archetypes. We've got the Leo archetype, the Chiron archetype, and the Pluto archetype in the very sensitive and powerful first house. That tells us a lot about a person. Already we have 50% of their psyche. We understand him really well already just from these 3 points. Now, what we also have are these oppositions to Moon, Mercury and Venus, to Chiron. So we go back to Taylor's comment. We can project that onto others and blame them for the pain. So when you don't understand Chiron's wound, or Pluto's wound in this case as well, you're going to project it onto others. If you don't own your own biases, your own violence, your own inner anger, your own power, if you don't understand it and you don't own it, then you will project it. And that's what the opposition is about. Opposition is projection. It is blame. And who's he blame? Everybody. That's what the seventh house represents. Everybody that comes to us. It's like a mirror. And in particular, we've got the feminine. The Moon and Venus is in particular there. Now, not that he was an abuser, not that he harmed women or anything like that, but he is projecting it onto society because Moon also represents society. Venus represents friendships as well as females. And Mercury, of course, is his acid tongue. If you listen to what he says about his opponents, the abuse that he gives them prior to the fights, it's absolutely obscene what he says. It's hurtful and hateful. So that's what projection is. He doesn't own his own wound. He projects it. How could the other part of Taylor's comment is others may sense someone's wound or sensitivity and use it to their advantage to manipulate them. It wouldn't be hard to manipulate Muhammad Ali because he lacks insight into himself. You could use his anger and pain and whatever else goes with that to stir him up. You wouldn't be able to wound him because he's pretty damn good as a boxer back in his day. He's now dead. He died in 2016. But you could use that to manipulate him into saying things that probably shouldn't say. So what am I looking for to say to someone that, oh my goodness, you are super duper sensitive? And most of the people that I've seen in my practice are super duper sensitive. If you're watching this video now, you're no doubt super duper sensitive. It doesn't mean that it's just Chiron or just Pluto somewhere in the chart. What I'm looking for are the angular houses, anything in the first, the fourth, the seventh, and the 10th. These are the critical houses of the chart. I'm also looking for aspects, hard aspects, conjunctions and oppositions to the Sun and the Moon, the two luminaries, as well as to the inner planets, the personal planets, Mercury, Venus and Mars. And what we have basically it's all there. This guy demands attention because of the luminaries here and the two inner planets here as well, like almost like a massive big conjunction. He demands attention, but it's really to boast about himself. It's about him. Even though he's got the beauty of that Leo, it's all about him. He can't help it. So we're looking at hard aspects to Chiron from the luminaries and the inner planets, Mercury, Venus and Mars. Sometimes Jupiter will play a role because he's a bridging planet between the inner planets or the personal planets and the generational planets. But when I look at aspects between outer planet and outer planet, they are nowhere near as visible to the individual or to others as with an inner planet and an outer planet. These guys are like on the surface, like wearing your heart on your sleeve, whereas the outer planets are deep in the psyche, really, really deep. So things are happening in there. Certainly they're happening, but they're not as noticeable because they are so deep and they act very slowly. It's almost like the foundations of a tree are the roots which are under the surface, and these are the leaves and the flowers flowing in the wind. And if the seasons change, they change. If the wind changes, they change. But the roots, they stay much the same. Okay. In astrology, he has no fixed rulership. I don't give rulership to Chiron. I just let him be himself. But others tried to, want him to be or believe him to be the ruler of Virgo, Virgo or Sagittarius, but I don't bother with that. It's just me. That doesn't mean that I'm right. I don't assign any sign or house to him. His behaviour is very similar to Pluto's, and in many ways, his lessons are more painful. This guy is like the graze when you fall off your bike, and it really hurts. Pluto is a lot deeper. He's like the bones. You break a bone, well, that hurts too. But yeah, this guy's with that anguish component of Chiron. When you are hurt, your sensitivity is hurt. Everything about you is hurt. With Pluto, it is more internal. So you are looking at the sign and house position of Chiron, his aspects to the other planets, and then you synthesize the whole lot into one whole. Now, I haven't looked at the grand triangle or the T-squares, of which we have Mars sitting there as well, he's the fulcrum to these oppositions. So it makes Mars very, very important. But we're talking about Chiron, so I don't really want to go through the whole chart. In transit, when he crosses a sensitive point, he's going to stimulate activity associated with that point. So the first one would have been ascendant, so that is the physical body. We don't know, well, I don't know what happened when that occurred, but he was probably very sick. With my chart, I've got Chiron 2 degrees from my ascendant, and I do know that in my infancy I was plagued with tonsillitis, mumps, measles, everything that children get, I got. And my memory of being under 5 was just one of pain and misery. It wasn't much fun. But working with him in meditation makes a difference to understand. So, you could have Chiron anywhere in the chart. You would look at what is he doing? What are the aspects that he's making, particularly with the personal planets? Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus and Mars. They're the ones that are keys. What house is he in? A psychological house. The 4th, the 8th and the 12th. They're pretty important. What about if he's in an air house, the 3rd, the 7th and the 11th. If he's in that triangle, then it's going to play more with the mind, that sort of thing. Okay, so you are exploring in your own chart the house placement. The sign placement is not as strong in my experience. Remember, this is about what I've learnt over the years and what I believe to be fairly accurate, is the sign placement does not play as big a role in the outer planets as does the house placement. Of course, the aspects are critical. They're the relationships between the archetypes. Are they friends? Ooh, that's a hard aspect. Mars and Chiron, and then Mars is also aspecting the Moon, Sun, Mercury, and Venus. So his role is to keep all of these guys happy as well as these guys happy. It's like a balance beam. Mars is like the little fulcrum there, the little wedge of a balance beam, and he's keeping these guys under control. So he wouldn't be happy with anyone because he's in the 10th house. He wants expression too, but he's so busy keeping these guys from tearing each other apart. Remember, oppositions are blame. It's you, you're the problem. Conjunctions are internal. Oh, I need to work on this. Okay, so conjunctions are internal that we work on. Oppositions are blaming someone else for your misfortunes. So in transit, I think I've got a transit chart down here somewhere. Here we go. In transit, when Chiron, where's Chiron? Here we go, up here. When Chiron crosses a point, it's like an electric fence. So here is 1954, which is when Muhammad Ali was 12. That's when he had his bike stolen from him and he decided to beat up the person. And he was wisely advised to go and learn how to box before you go trying to beat up people. So over the next 10 years or so, up until 1960, when he won the gold medal in the Olympics in 1960, we have a huge learning curve. So it looks like for that period, let me go back here to 54 again, over that 6-year period, he's hitting all of these key points, boom, 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 boom. Each of them would have been pretty heavy because he's sensitive. So who is he going to take his pain out on? Others. He uses other people as a punching bag because he's not owning it. If he doesn't own it, he's going to project it. So that's where that comes into it. Okay, now I think I've sort of covered most of what I wanted to cover here. Chiron looks like he is the best archetype to have, but you need to understand his nature, psychological nature in particular, to be able to maximize the gift that you have been given. It's like with Pluto. Pluto has phenomenal power of regeneration and healing and transformation. Well, so does Chiron. They're very similar that way. But you have to earn it. And there's only one way that I know of, and that's through hard work, dedicated practice of meditation, contemplation, processing, and talking and studying and learning about his placement in your chart, and then visiting him and having a chat. Okay, so there we go. I'll put this up into the body of the Coddiwompling, and I will see you maybe at the next video. Don't forget to hit the like, and all the best till the next one. And thanks to Taylor. This is a good one.